We've done a lot of videos that have been based on the subject matter of lawyers, and I know this would offend people who have, shall we say, what people in their legal family surname association that are lawyers. That would offend them that we would be actually pointing them out to be exactly what is defined the process and what they advocate. But we have to understand that they are not by chance called devil's advocates. Christ was quite direct about them in Luke 11. Even though it was translated scribes in some biblical translations, it was because of the fact that they were writing things that were not from God. They were writing things according to men, and therefore this is what we call positive law. It's not the law of God, it's the law of men who write laws. And therefore, it's not coming from the source of purity, it's not coming from what is natural, it's coming from this twisted version that we call law in today's world called legal. And legal is a perversion of God's law. It tries to mirror it, but it's a perversion of it. It tries to reflect that there is no covenant with God under the Old Testament, and that this is here only as the only option for the world of the people that are caught up in their control. Now we have to remember in the history of the Levites, there was nothing for the Levites. They were the temple priests who also governed law and sacrifice for sins. There was no place for them after the knowing in the prophecy that Jesus Christ was going to arrive, that was going to cancel all debt. Therefore, there would be no longer a sacrifice for sin because he was the ultimate sacrifice. He could only bring in what Adam had lost, and therefore he had canceled out all debt. Now, the legalists and the legalism system that we see today is part of I don't see grace, I have nothing to do with free grace, I have nothing to do with God or his remedy or his relief that he has provided. We're going to go down a path in legal that actually denies that and is willing to take all the torture and all the insanity that can be placed by evil that could only be perpetrated by a master deceiver who brought the original man who was perfect into sin, which was Satan. So when Christ called them serpents and vipers, it was the most appropriate name to call them because they were perverting the truth and the spirituality that came from God, and they were leading the people down a path that was definitely directed towards mammon or commercialization. And therefore, they knew that if the people did not understand or they had no spirituality, they'd be easily placed in or misled or maneuvered, persuaded into this direction. And all it took was basically a spell. So the warnings have been through the Bible of what would be something that would be contrary to the grace that Christ was going to provide. And when we look at Job 32, 21, 22, when it warned against accepting any flattering titles, and we looked up flattering title, meaning out of the Hebrew, kana, K-N-A-H, or K-A-N-A, we saw that in the Hebrew translation of that word that related to flattering titles, it said that it was closely directed towards the English word surname. So it is not by chance that in the legal system that has nothing to do with grace, as Noah Webster's 1828 displayed in its third definition under legal, that it was opposite to free grace. It was based on man operating with no relief covenant or new covenant with God, but it was based on man earning his salvation based on works. That is basically not the direction anybody of God's people want to be down. But the legalists that are out there, have run a situation with the advocating of Satan's will to con people into believing that the legal system will actually contemplate and work with the concept of spirituality. But you can't mix those two together. They were never together, and therefore they can't be together. You can't merge truth with fiction. So in the Canadian Law Dictionary, the Dictionary of Canadian Law, we have to be careful because there is a Canadian Law Dictionary, but there is a Dictionary of Canadian Law. So we want to be careful about which we're reading out of, because I don't want anybody looking for something and then they don't find it after they possibly even order a book from what they've seen on these videos. But the word legal, very, very interesting. Canada's a unique place because if you wanted to pull off misleading definitions, misleading advertisement, Canada seems to be able to pull that off better than a lot of other countries. We have very loose laws on advertisers and advertisements. They put in the word legal when they're advertising the definition. They say it's according to law. But they're not talking about the law of God. They leave that very ambiguous. It's not stating what law or how it's associated with law. Is it associated with the Bible, the law that's found in the Bible, or is it associated with the laws of men? Well, they take a little bit of time, but they put in the second definition, of or relating to the law of lawyers. Okay, well, now we have to go to Luke 11. Why did the King James translators put that in there? There must have been a concern that they were always concerned with the lawyers next to the crown, because I believe that even the lawyers were controlling the crown to a large extent. They knew how to maneuver these monarchs and put basically things in place that would even concern the monarch. So therefore, the monarch knew not to sit on the throne with a legal last name. So they sat in nobility even at the point that the laws that govern the society that the monarchs were controlling could basically not go after the king. Therefore, it was the king could do no wrong or could not sin. Well, in the world of commerce, you can't sin with a name that is related to being christened or being brought in under the covenant of God. So the monarchs, of course, claim Christianity. They sit on the throne with a Christian name, but they will refuse to ever be identified with a legal surname while they sit on the throne, which is no different than the Pope. And they sit there in nobility because nobility cannot have anything in essence to do with the commerce in the rank that it stands in. If I say that word rank, I'll be careful on that. The level of the title that they bear, because they're bearing a title of truth, yet behind the scenes they're operating separately in a control of how the commerce operates. So you will never find the monarch of Canada operating, sitting on the throne, known as Queen Elizabeth, with the title Windsor, because of the fact that that is a legal arms name, and that would bring about the concept of taxation. So when they sit on the throne, everything that's in there is run from Buckingham Palace, and we have to understand that Buckingham, Ham was the cursed one of the three sons of Noah, and therefore Ham exposed Noah's nakedness. He uncovered his nakedness in what was in that account, and this caused a major problem in the account in Genesis. But we have to understand there, it exposed nakedness but in an impure sense, and therefore Noah cursed Ham and his descendants, and therefore it is not unique that today, when we call something to do with acting or an actor, a legal person is under persona, which means someone who wears a mask, an actor on the stage, and someone who's not a very good actor is called a ham. Ham is also noted as an unclean meat to eat, because the Israelites would not eat it because it was something that was considered unclean, mainly because of the type of animal it was and the parasites that occurred in the meat, therefore not being healthy for an individual under the nation of Israel to actually to basically partake in, because it would actually affect their health. So God condemned the use of that meat for that reason. So when we talk about the word ham, bad actor, usually that's what we see it as. But we look to the palace that has such a huge control over such a large realm of the earth, and the nobility that reign over that basically are sitting in a palace called Buckingham. So they're kicking Ham, the actor, the ones that basically are cursed, and then teach them cursive writing to basically take on a name that will refer to them as being a legal actor. It all connects. Very hard for people to comprehend how deep this research goes. But what we're doing here is just saying, look, you can look at the references, the books we're going to. You can go into the research of what I've said in the video, and if you can find something to the contrary, I'd be highly surprised. Mainly because the fact is that when you find evidence and you can find it being used as fact, not fiction, you're now basically able to see how they're operating the legal commerce world. And how easy is it to basically buck ham, okay, and pass the buck when somebody is basically deceived under this whole system that is based on fiction, a curse, something against what God had intended, and then basically running a system that uses people under that as nothing more than, basically impersonators acting on a title that they're going to forever pay tax on and forever actually be under the encumbrance of sin and debt. So the legalists promote this. This is what they're about. They do not promote truth. So never relate a lawyer to anything that has to do with God's truth. They are professional liars.